The castle gates closed with a sound that echoed through the stone corridors. It was 3 minutes past midnight. Inside the fortress walls, Princess Charlotte slept in her tower room. Unaware that her life was about to change forever, Commander Marcus had served the royal family for 17 years. His uniform still smelled of starch. His boots reflected the hallway lights as he made his final rounds before the night shift ended. He loved these quiet hours. The castle felt peaceful then. Safe. But something felt different that night. Marcus couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way the wind moved against the eastern wall. Maybe it was instinct, the kind that kept soldiers alive in battles he never spoke about. He decided to check the princess's wing. Just to be sure, the tower stairs spiraled upward. His footsteps were the only sound. When he reached the top floor, the corridor was exactly as it should be. 2 guards stood at their posts. Everything normal. He was turning to leave when he heard it. A sound from the princess's room. Not a scream. Something quieter. Something worse. The sound of someone trying not to make noise. Marcus moved without thinking. He pushed through the heavy wooden door and froze. 3 figures in dark clothing stood around Charlotte's bed. The princess was being lifted, her small body almost invisible against their black jackets. A cloth was being pressed toward her face. Time seemed to stop. "Drop her," Marcus said. His voice was steady. His hand was on his weapon. Now, the intruders turned. For a moment, no one moved. Then everything happened at once. Charlotte screamed. The men bolted toward the window. Marcus tackled the nearest one, but there were too many. A rope had been secured to the stone balcony. They were rappelling down the tower wall. Within seconds, they had vanished into the darkness, leaving only the sound of footsteps hitting cobblestones far below. Marcus rushed to the window. Vehicles waited in the shadows beyond the outer gates. The kidnappers had planned this perfectly. Security had been breached. Royal guards were scattered. By the time anyone could respond, the princess would be gone. But Marcus was already moving. He didn't wait for backup. He didn't follow protocol. Protocol meant Charlotte would be in danger while authorities coordinated. He grabbed a rope and descended the same way the kidnappers had come, jumping the final 10 feet to the courtyard below. Pain shot through his ankles as he landed, but he kept running. The vehicles were moving. Marcus ran toward the nearest horse in the royal stable, somehow already saddled and ready. He didn't question how. He just pushed the animal forward, bursting through the castle gates into the night. Behind him, alarms were sounding. Guards were shouting. But Marcus had a head start, and he had something the kidnappers didn't have. He had hope. He had a reason to move faster than fear could ever move. The chase had begun. The roads ahead were dark and winding. Somewhere out there, a princess was being taken away. And one man had decided that wasn't going to happen on his watch. Not tonight. Not ever. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time to join us. This story gets more intense from here. Every twist will leave you breathless. The horse's hooves struck the cobblestone, rode in a rhythm that matched Marcus's heartbeat, faster, faster. In the distance, taillights glowed red against the darkness. He could see them. 2 vehicles traveling in formation, heading north toward the mountain passes. They drove with confidence. Too much confidence. They thought they had time. They thought no one could catch them. They were wrong. Marcus had learned to track in places most people never spoke about. He knew how to read the smallest details, the way dust settled after a vehicle passed, the direction of disturbed gravel, the barely visible tire marks on wet ground. He knew how to hunt. The first vehicle suddenly pulled away from the second, accelerating into the black. A distraction. Marcus recognized the tactic immediately. Let the pursuer follow one truck while the princess was moved to the other. It was smart, professional. These weren't random criminals. Marcus held steady on the first vehicle anyway. He had to think like they did. They would separate. They would split up again. They would eventually converge at a single location, a safe house, a compound, somewhere remote where no one could hear what happened next. His radio crackled. The king's voice came through, strained and sharp. "Commander, you're pursuing unauthorized. Return to the castle." Marcus didn't respond. He couldn't think about orders right now. He could only think about Charlotte's small face, frightened and struggling in those men's arms. The distance between him and the first vehicle was closing. The drivers were pushing faster, confident in their escape. But the road ahead curved sharply, a mountain pass. Stone cliffs on one side, a drop on the other. Perfect place for a mistake. Marcus leaned forward on the horse, whispering something, not a prayer, but close. The animal seemed to understand. It moved with perfect rhythm, muscles straining, breathing hard but steady. The vehicle ahead hit the curve. Its brake lights flashed once. Then again, too hard. The driver had panicked, not expecting a pursuer to reach him this fast. The truck veered toward the cliff edge, tires smoking, sliding on gravel. Marcus made his decision in a half-second. He dismounted mid-gallop and ran toward the vehicle. The driver was fighting for control, cursing, finally correcting the path. The truck straightened. For a moment, it looked like they might escape down the other side, but Marcus had reached the back of the vehicle. He grabbed onto the metal frame, pulling himself up and onto the roof. His fingers found purchase on the luggage rack. The truck was moving at dangerous speed, but Marcus held firm. He had trained for this. Not exactly this, but something close enough. He worked his way toward the front of the roof, bracing against the wind and motion. The driver saw him through the windshield. Panic. The truck swerved violently, trying to throw him off. Marcus held on. Then the radio came alive again. A woman's voice. Not the king this time. The Queen, Charlotte. There was a pause, filled with a mother's desperate hope. "Baby, can you hear me?" For just a moment a small voice came through, terrified. "Mama." Everything stopped inside Marcus's chest. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here. Stay strong." The radio went silent. The signal had been traced. They knew where the princess was calling from. Police cars were mobilizing. Helicopters would be in the air. But Marcus knew it wouldn't be fast enough. Whoever had organized this had planned for official responses. They had contingencies. Marcus was the contingency they hadn't planned for. The vehicle finally stopped at a compound built into the mountainside. High walls, cameras, armed men waiting at the gate, professional security. Whatever this was, whoever was behind it had serious resources. Marcus had dismounted 2 miles back. Moving through the forest on foot, he used the darkness like a weapon, staying upwind of the guard dogs. Moving with the slow precision of someone who had done this before in places that didn't exist on any map, he found a vantage point on a ridge overlooking the compound. Through binoculars, he watched. The princess was carried inside. She was crying, but unhurt. Marcus felt something release in his chest at that. Small mercy. But then he saw something that made his blood turn cold. A black sedan pulled through the gate. The man who emerged wore an expensive suit despite the late hour. Silver hair, confident bearing. Marcus recognized him immediately. Everyone recognized him. He was Camilla's son, the queen's estranged nephew. A man born into royalty but twisted by resentment. He had been pushed out of the family years ago, accused of financial crimes, cut off from inheritance, disgraced, forgotten, or so everyone thought. Marcus's earpiece came alive. "Marcus, we have identification on the compound. It's owned by offshore accounts linked to..." The voice paused. There was shock in it. "Linked to the Duchess's family? We're getting a warrant now." So it was true. This wasn't about money. This was about power. About revenge. About a man who had been rejected by a family and had decided to take what couldn't be given to him willingly. Through the binoculars, Marcus watched as Camilla's son entered the building. He was smiling. Actual, genuine joy on his face. The kind that only came from someone who believed they had finally won. They didn't know. Marcus was coming. The compound had 17 guards, electronic surveillance, reinforced entry points. Marcus had a knife, a pistol with 7 rounds, the kind of desperation that sometimes passed for courage. It should have felt like impossible odds. But Marcus had learned long ago that impossible situations were just situations that required you to stop thinking and start acting. He moved down from the ridge, staying in the shadows. The perimeter was his first problem. 2 guards patrolled the western wall, moving in a pattern that repeated every 45 seconds. Marcus timed it. On their next sweep, he moved. The first guard never saw him coming. Marcus didn't kill him in necessary noise. Unnecessary complications, but he put the man down hard and fast, dragging him behind a storage shed. The second guard turned at the sound, but Marcus was already moving. 1 quick strike. The guard dropped. The electronic lock on the service entrance required a keycard. Marcus had watched his employees move through the facility during his surveillance. He had seen the way they swiped. He had photographed the placement of the cameras. He had stolen a keycard from a guard. 5 minutes earlier, inside the compound, the layout was exactly as he had analyzed it from the outside. Long corridors. Administrative offices on one side, living quarters on the other. In a security room, Marcus needed to disable the cameras. Needed the feed to show a loop rather than real-time footage. It was risky. It was also essential he move through the compound like a ghost. Years of training, dozens of operations in places that officially never happened, it all came together now. Every skill, every technique, every moment of discipline condensed into precise action. The security room had 2 guards. 1 at the console. 1 standing watch. Marcus entered quietly, the knife swift and certain. The first guard went down silently. The second one reached for an alarm button. Marcus was faster. 45 seconds later, the camera feed was looped. The security system showed nothing out of place. A ghost protocol for a ghost operation. Now, he just had to find the princess. The holding room was in the basement. Marcus had found architectural plans during his investigation. He had memorized every corridor, every intersection, every potential exit. But memories didn't account for the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. They didn't account for the weight of what would happen if he failed. He descended the concrete stairs slowly. The sound of voices echoed from below. One was Camilla's son, angry, impatient. "She's not eating. She's not speaking to me. This isn't how this was supposed to work," another voice responded, nervous, apologetic. "She's traumatized, sir. She needs time too. I don't have time for her to adjust. We leave in 2 hours. Everything needs to move on schedule." Marcus stopped at the bottom of the stairs. There were 3 guards outside a reinforced door. The princess was inside. He was sure of it. He had one chance to get this right. Marcus had thought about this moment since the beginning. The mathematics of violence. 3 guards meant noise. Noise meant response. Response meant he would have to fight his way out with a child, through armed men, up concrete stairs, into a compound where every second brought more resistance. The odds were terrible. But Charlotte was in that room. Marcus stepped into the hallway and fired twice. The sound was deafening in the concrete space. 2 guards went down. The third returned fire immediately, spraying bullets down the corridor. Marcus was already moving. The third guard's attention split between Marcus and the sound of their leader's voice coming through their radios. Demanding status, Marcus closed the distance in 4 quick strides. No more bullets. No more mercy. Just efficiency. The guard fell. He reached the reinforced door. Electronic lock. Different system than the service entrance. He had seconds. Footsteps were coming from upstairs, shouts. The alarm loop was compromised. Marcus pulled a device from his jacket pocket. A signal disruptor. State-of-the-art technology. The kind that shouldn't exist in the hands of a royal guard. But then Marcus had had another life before the castle. Another life with different job descriptions. The lock disengaged. Marcus pushed the door. Open and found her. Charlotte was sitting on a cot, eyes wide with fear. When she saw the guard uniform, the tension in her body shifted. Hope, recognition. "You came," she whispered.
"Yes, princess."
"I came. We need to move, now." He carried her toward the stairs. She was light, so small. Maybe 7 years old. Old enough to understand danger. Old enough to know what this meant. The footsteps were getting closer. More guards. Camilla's son among them, maybe. Marcus didn't look back. He just moved up the stairs, down the corridor, toward the service exit he had entered through. Stop, Commander, stop. The voice was Camilla's son himself, breathless from running. You don't understand what's happening here? Marcus turned. The man stood with 2 guards at the far end of the corridor, shaken, angry, but trying to maintain control. This is about leverage. About forcing my mother to acknowledge me, to give me what I deserve. The princess is going to be fine. She'll be released once the king meets my demands. That's not how this ends, Marcus said quietly. That's exactly how it ends, Camilla's son replied. Because if you leave this compound with her, I release everything, documents, financial records, information about the royal family that would destroy them. I've prepared for this. I have backups in 12 countries. You kill me? You think it stops anything? You're wrong. It only ensures the information goes public. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Financial crimes, scandals, the kind of revelations that shattered dynasties. Marcus looked at the princess. She was looking back at him, waiting, trusting, terrified, but trusting. Then I guess the royal family has to accept that, Marcus said. He kept moving. The gunshot started before he reached the exit, but he had already moved around the corner. 1 bullet grazed his shoulder, pain sharp and clarifying. He didn't slow down. The night air hit his face as he burst through the service door. A horse waiting in the shadows. Not the same one. This one had been tied there hours ago during his preparation. Always have an exit strategy. Always assume you'll need to run. Marcus placed Charlotte on the horse in front of him and kicked hard. Behind them, compound erupted in chaos. But they were already moving into the darkness, toward the mountain passes, toward the valley where police vehicles were waiting, toward rescue. The chase was over. The hospital was white and sterile and full of people asking Marcus questions. Police, government officials, intelligence services that technically didn't employ him but definitely had in the past. He sat in a chair in the hallway, watching doctors move in and out of Charlotte's room. She was being examined, tested, evaluated. The bullet graze on his shoulder had been cleaned and bandaged by a nurse who worked on him quickly, efficiently, then moved on to more important things. The king appeared first, not in uniform. Just an old man with frightened eyes who had almost lost his daughter. He walked directly to Marcus and placed a hand on his shoulder, the uninjured one. "Thank you," he said. Nothing more could adequately express what those words contained. The queen came next. She looked at Marcus for a long moment, then embraced him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. But then came the harder questions. Officials wanted to know how Camilla's son had accessed the compound's blueprints, how he had corrupted security personnel, how far the conspiracy extended. They wanted to understand what he had been planning, what his endgame was. And they wanted to know about the information he had threatened to release. That was the part that mattered most. 4 people sat in a secure room: the Prime Minister, the Defense Secretary, the head of intelligence, and the king. They asked Marcus what Camilla's son had said. Marcus told them everything. The room became very quiet. "There are documents," the intelligence head said finally. "We've been investigating him for years. Financial crimes, corruption, some of it reaches higher than we'd like to admit. We've contained it. But if he were to release everything unredacted, uncontextualized, it would be catastrophic," the Prime Minister finished. The king sat motionless. "My sister's son knew things about the family, about the government, things that could destroy institutions that have stood for centuries. What do we do?" the Defense Secretary asked. The question was directed at no one and everyone. A question that had no good answer. "We let him go," the intelligence head said. "We disappear the evidence. We allow him to believe his leverage still exists. We offer him exile, a comfortable one. Enough money to live well, on the condition he never speaks about what he knows. It's not justice, but it's containment." The king looked at Marcus. "What do you think, Commander?" Marcus had been trained to follow orders, trained to operate in moral gray areas where right and wrong became suggestions instead of certainties. He had operated in those gray areas his entire adult life. They had become his home. I think the princess is safe. That was the mission. That was everything. The king nodded. He understood what Marcus wasn't saying. Understood that some operations had no clean conclusions. That sometimes the best you could do was prevent the worst from happening and accept that perfect justice wasn't possible. Within a week, Camilla's son was gone. He left the country quietly, official statements saying he was relocating for business opportunities. No charges were filed. No public scandal emerged. The evidence of the conspiracy was quietly filed away in archives that would never be accessed. Marcus was called to the castle 3 days later. The king awarded him a medal. The ceremony was private. No press, no public celebration. Just the family, their closest advisors. And a man who had run into the darkness to save a child and had somehow managed to do it. But after the ceremony, when everyone else had left, the king took Marcus aside. There will be consequences, the king said. Not for you. For the family? For me? For the decisions we made in that room? History might judge us harshly for what we didn't do. For the criminal we allowed to escape? Perhaps, Marcus replied. Can you live with that? The king asked. Marcus thought about Charlotte's face when she saw him in the basement. Thought about carrying her through the darkness. Thought about how sometimes being a hero meant accepting that the world wouldn't be perfect afterward. Yes, Marcus said. I can live with that. 3 months later, things had almost returned to normal. The castle went through its daily routines. Guards patrolled the halls. The royal family conducted state business. The public moved on to new scandals, new stories, new reasons to care. But some things had changed irrevocably. Charlotte had nightmares. Not every night, but often enough that her mother started sleeping in the adjacent room, ready to comfort her when the darkness became too heavy. She was smaller than she should be, more cautious. Her childhood had been shortened by trauma, and no one could give it back to her. Marcus saw her sometimes in the castle corridors. She would look at him with eyes that held too much knowledge, too much fear that had been survived. She would bow slightly the way she had been taught. A princess acknowledging her protector. He would nod back. One afternoon, she was playing in the castle garden. Marcus was doing his rounds. She saw him and ran over, her small body moving with the freedom of someone learning to trust safety again. Will you play chess with me? She asked. Mama says I should try to do normal things again. Normal things that make me happy. Marcus sat with her for 2 hours. She was clever, this small child. She understood strategy in a way that suggested she had learned something in that basement that no 7-year-old should ever have to learn. Commander Marcus, she said during the game. Why did you save me? You could have let the guards handle it. Marcus considered the question carefully. Because you mattered more than following orders. She nodded as if he had confirmed something she already knew. She moved her piece across the board. That's good. That's how people should be. The game continued. The afternoon shifted toward evening. Eventually, her mother came to collect her for dinner. Charlotte hugged Marcus quickly, then left with her mother's hand in hers. Marcus stayed in the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the archives of intelligence services, classified documents detailed a conspiracy that had never happened. A crime that was technically still unsolved. A man who had never been punished. Justice, Marcus had learned, was a luxury that didn't always exist in the real world. But Charlotte was alive. She was healing. She was learning to trust safety again. She would grow up, find happiness, build a life. She would never fully escape what had happened to her, but she would survive it. She would be okay. That had to be enough. The gates of the castle stood solid and permanent against the darkening sky. Behind them, a family tried to move forward. Behind them, a young princess played chess and learned to smile again. Behind them, a world continued its complicated spin. And on the grounds, a guard walked his nightly rounds, keeping watch over everything that mattered. Keeping watch over the safety of those who couldn't protect themselves? Some people called him a hero. But Marcus knew the truth. He was simply someone who had made a choice when choices still mattered. He had run into the darkness and brought someone back to the light. The rest, the politics, the compromises, the criminals who walked free, that was the cost of living in the real world. A world where perfection was impossible, but love was enough. Where one person could make a difference, even if the whole situation never got neatly resolved. Charlotte would remember him forever. He would remain a part of her story the moment her world almost ended, but someone decided it wouldn't. And that, more than any medal or official recognition, was what it meant to be a protector. The night deepened. The castle settled into darkness, and the guard continued walking, forever alert, forever ready, forever watching over the sleep of those he had sworn to protect.